All right, all right, all right. We live. Good afternoon, good day, good morning, wherever you are in the world. We're excited to be here. Excited to be here on the Pivot, brought to you by the Creator Guild in association with SOHH. And we are here today to have another exciting conversation about the media business with none other than Teresa Ashford of Ashford Media Group, a global music marketing organization agency based in Chicago, doing a lot of big things, and we get to work with you a lot. And we are really excited to hear about how you got started, your whole background, what you got going on for 2023. We know we got a lot to talk about. So let's get
hmm
into it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So just wanted to start with that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate you. So, we're going to talk a little bit because we're talking right now to a community of folks who are, aspiring media professionals. And, so you've been through all of this. You're over here on the other side, and we want to impart some wisdom in addition to all the other things we're going to talk about today. So let's start off with
Perfect.
how you got started, because I think that everybody kind of figures that this road looks a certain way, but it never looks the way we expect. So how did you get started in the media business?
Yes, didn't know that I was going to do this. I just knew that I knew that I wanted to work in music and entertainment. Is like even as a little girl, I just if someone would ask me like, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" And when I was 4 years old, I would say I was going to be in music, and I thought I was going to be a singer. That didn't really, end up the way that that trajectory didn't continue. But so I went to college for music business, got my first internship at Sony. I think it was my sophomore year of college. And that internship was in the publicity department of Sony Masterworks, which is actually Sony's like Broadway, classical, and sort of like adult contemporary label. And so it was sort of like a foot in the door for me. I had no idea what publicity was. I just knew I kind of wanted to explore the music business and see if this was a fit for me, especially being like in college, because I knew if this wasn't a fit, I was going to need to change my major and figure something out.
Mhm.
So had my first internship, realized I loved it, realized like, I mean, I feel like everybody, when they say they want to go into music business, originally they're like, oh, I want to be an A&R, or, I want to work directly with the artists and the music, and be a producer, whatever the case may be. And that was actually like where I, was with it as well in college. Like I was telling everybody, look, I think I want to be an A&R. But when I got in my foot in the door with this PR internship, I realized like, oh, actually, this aligns a lot more with sort of my other interests. So I love like reading, I love writing, I love like award shows and red carpet moments and all that kind of stuff. Like I was like the little kid that was watching like all the People's Choice Awards and all that kind of stuff when I was
Um,
little. So I realized that publicity aligned the want that I had of like wanting to be connected to the artists and work directly with the artists. And then sort of my other interests of music that were associated with sort of just like media and literature and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of how I started and got my foot in the door and got that internship. That was
You
like
know what?
really
I
the
think
first
that
step.
that's really key to test it out. A lot of us, we kind of have a path in our brain from when we were kids. Like I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I went to school, and that microbiology kicked my behind, and I changed my major.
Oh,
Right. So it's like test it out. That internship was key for you to actually see that it wasn't a career as a singer or an artist that you were looking at. What you loved about music was the storytelling behind it.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
then you got into the Sony. So then you wound up working with L.A. Reid.
Yeah. That was my
Talk
first real job in the
Yeah,
music
that's
industry.
huge.
It was like, so basically, I mean, I started my internship at Sony my sophomore year of college. So I had interned with Sony for about, at that point, like 2 years. Because I actually started this job with LA Reid my senior year of college. It was probably about 2 to 3 months before I graduated. I had to actually take my graduation day off of work, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. But the thing of how I got to say about that is like I just really made myself really indispensable within, you know, when that opportunity hit, I guess like the HR boards or whatever for it. I didn't even actually know what I was interviewing for when I first went through the first couple of rounds of interviews. But then it was like by the third or fourth interview, I realized like, oh, this is what I'm interviewing for, you know?
Wow.
Coincidentally, I didn't actually get the job. Like somebody else got the job first. I was runner up. She got let go within a few days, and then they called me, and
That
I
must have been
was there
scary
for
for
about
you.
8 months.
The
It
top,
was. I was.
the top candidate gets let go, and then they call you, and you're like, wait a minute, I don't know about this. This is crazy.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know, but yeah, no, it was actually one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Because I always tell people it was my craft, because obviously I came from a background of working in classical Broadway music. It wasn't frontline music. It wasn't rap and hip hop and pop, you know? So that was like my crash course in the world of pop music. Seeing, you know, the people that came through the office every day. It was like being in school for, you know, and doing your little Googles when people walk in, seeing who people are. And then you're realizing like, oh, I'm actually talking to some of the biggest movers and shakers of the industry. And
who was the biggest person that when you were like, oh my God, I like, you know, you're telling your family, oh my God, somebody so-and-so came in today?
Man.
I mean, because L.A. Reid is huge. I mean, to be able to work with L.A. Reid himself, he is a celebrity in his own right. You must have been.
This is kind of silly because it's not an artist, but I was really excited about this one. So Kenan Thompson from Kenan and Kel came in one day to like just chop it up about some stuff, and I was like, oh, whoa, like, you know, like I grew up watching you on Nickelodeon, and now you're sitting in this office. And that's why I was a little bit more excited about somebody like that, because, you know, you get a little jaded, especially in this industry, when you see artists every day or whatever. And that wasn't like your typical rapper or artist. Like, you know, we got to a point where like Sierra would be through the office every other day, Future would be through the office every other day, you know. So when I saw him, I was like, oh, this is actually different.
Yeah, somebody said I love Kenan. Yeah, he's a fun dude to see. So that was when you kind of realized, wait, this is I'm on another level, and you're working with the top leading person in the music industry on some of the biggest acts in the music industry. A lot of pressure, but obviously you were able to handle it. Then you went from Sony to another organization, and then you finally got to your own. So I want to talk about your path from Sony and how did you get to where you are with your
today. Yeah. So after the L.A. Reid stint, I moved over to Legacy Recordings, which is Sony's catalog label. I stayed there for about 5 years. That's where I really learned my media relations skill set. We were across all genres at a really high level, working like, 20th anniversary of A Tribe Called Quest, 20th like various like anniversary dates, things like that. But working with huge top tier major artists, right? Superstar artists. So from there, I kind of felt like, you know, when you're working for a catalog label, oftentimes like you're at that point, you know, your tribe's 12th publicists that they've had in their career or whatever the case may be, and they're not really that engaged. And you're also not really, you're keeping the artist's legacy alive, which is super important, but you're not sort of developing the artist, and you're not breaking. Yeah. So I really felt like, I was like, man, this is great, and I'm learning so much, but I really wanted to get my roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty and really develop and break artists. So I moved over to Red Distribution, which is now The Orchard. And I worked in their PR department, basically like co-leading their PR department with another person for about 2 to 3 years. At Red was the time when I sort of really developed my like digital marketing, PR, digital PR sort of skill set, focusing more on, because at that time it was like when Facebook Lives were popping off and things like that. So like the streaming world, the idea of like doing sort of like Facebook sessions and things like that was like really exciting. So the landscape of media was really changing at that time, when I was also changing how I was approaching how I did my job. So at Red, after about 6 months of being at Red, a tiny artist from Chicago named G Herbo, his label, Machine Entertainment Group, did their distribution deal with Red Distribution. And I sort of became the sort of like de facto label publicist for G Herbo. This was probably in like 2016 or so, sort of like 8 months before his debut project, Humble Beast, had come out. And I basically jumped on the G Herbo bandwagon at Humble Beast and wrote out his entire media trajectory up until about 2018, when they actually asked me if I would be willing to leave corporate and join Machine full time and join the independent, independent label space full time and head their PR and marketing department at the label. They were bolstering the label at the time. They had signed a bunch of emerging talent in the Chicago market. So they needed to sort of like bolster their staff and all of their facilities.
And this was going to give you an opportunity to work with new and emerging artists, because prior to that, you had been working with established names. And that's a lot different when you can call and say, hey, I've got Sierra, Future, people opening up the door, they're picking up the phone. But when you're talking about a new artist, it's a lot more difficult. But
yeah, it is. I wanted that. And I mean, listen, I wanted it. And then especially was the biggest transition to developing artists, because you do a mix of established artists and there are a lot of developing artists as part of the structure there. So at first it was a huge learning curve. Like I realized, I was like, whoa, I've been working with, CBS Sunday Morning, The Today Show, Rolling Stone, and like these people aren't going to answer or like cover some of the artists that I'm trying to, work right now. And so there was a little transition moment for sure where I had to like definitely, sit down and do my research and get my list together. Figure it all out and realize that it was a totally different way to approach PR and how to build exposure for an artist, because you're starting from the ground. And then
that must have really worked well for you, because your next move was building your own. So you kind of went to that to actually create your own. So first of all, why did you decide you wanted to go from having had an established career? I mean, you had great resume. You can get a job pretty much anywhere. You want to go and start your own from the start, from the bottom. Why pivot to creating your own brand?
I think it was a lot of the lifeblood here in Chicago is very entrepreneurially driven. So when I moved to Chicago, when I first took the position with Machine, I started to realize, one, that I was everybody's best kept secret. Like everybody was coming up to me being like, oh, you're the girl that does all this stuff for Herb. Like now they started to see me, behind the scenes at the shows, moving around, things like that. And a lot of people started to, just ask if I would be willing to do their PR, do their marketing, or whatever the case may be. And at that point, I had never even thought like, oh, I could start my own thing and do this, like have a whole little side hustle or whatever the case, whatever. But I kind of realized like this could be way more than just a side hustle. Also, given that I had moved into an environment where there are so many entrepreneurs, so many new businesses, things like that. So I was like, man, maybe I should just give this a shot. And Chicago, the support that I feel here from the community is just a different type of support than I had in New York. Mm-hmm. So starting a business here was kind of like a no-brainer just because of the community support and the community relationships that I have here. So I decided to start a business, and also just for me, I have a master's degree in media management as well, and a lot of that was sort of like entrepreneurially focused in sort of starting your own company, starting your own media brand, that type of thing, starting your own blog or whatever. So one of my my master's sort of keystone or capstone project was like developing a media company and what that would look like. And so I already had the blueprint from my master's program, shout out to the New School. But I already had the blueprint, and Damn, I just realized I have one earring in. Let me take this out.
Well, hey, it's all good. You looking
Woo!
good.
You know,
And
we
it's
trying over
amazing.
here.
You had this blueprint. So it seems like your life was already moving in that direction, but you didn't even necessarily realize it until the day you realized it. What
Yeah.
would you say is the biggest challenge in making a pivot like that? And what would you, recommend to folks who are looking to kind of get away from the job force and kind of create their own brand?
The biggest challenge for me was like, I have to do everything. It was like that moment of like, oh man, like I gotta be HR, I gotta be accounting, I gotta be, accounts payable, accounts receivable, I gotta pay these people. Like, now
Lord,
I have a staff of three sort of like full-time people and then some interns. So now that's a other thing of like, there are days where, we have as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as whatever, like we have bosses, we have moments where we're like, man, today's not my day, but I
right.
still got to do this with these people looking at me,
Oh
waiting
my,
for me
my.
to give them direction. You know what I mean? So that was like the biggest, and also that was the biggest learning curve, but also the idea that like, for me, especially like working on my own projects and things like that, had to start taking the ideas and the brainstorming out of my own head and like sort of bring it into the team environment so that my team could really understand what we were doing and what the goals were, and weren't just like sort of task based and kind of waiting for
Exactly. So
my
they can
direction.
start to eventually do things on their own because you can't
Exactly.
be right. So it's how do I distill everything that I've got to all of these folks?
Exactly. And distill it, develop them, and then continue to also get the job done. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
almost became like, man, I thought, I would have more time on my hands to sort of develop my own skills, where now I feel like I'm really developing the skills of I spend a lot of my time developing the skills of my team. But that's paid off even just in I've had a team now, like a fuller team now for about a year and a half, and I feel the support in a way that I can't even explain. So I will say like one of the biggest things that I would like tips for new business owners or people trying to start their own media company or whatever, like take that time to develop your team because it will pay off tenfold.
So what do you do? What's your day look like? I mean, let's talk about who you've got coming down because you've always got something going on. We worked with you a lot last year with some of the events that you're working and the projects you're working on. What's coming up for 2023? What's your day look like every day? And what do you have coming up for this year?
Man, so day to day for me is I'm a big gym person. Like I use the gym to manage my stress and anxiety because we deal with a lot of stress as publicists. Everything is, very time sensitive, time oriented. So I'm always on timelines. I'm always on deadlines. So a typical day for me is wake up first, start with the gym, no questions asked. Then from there, I'm typically on my computer I'm typically on email by 8 a.m. I'm on my computer actually like knocking things out by 9 a.m. And then by like noon, it's nothing but phone calls. Usually a couple of times a week, I'll be on shoots, like on set for, last week I just had a big media brand a big media partner from New York coming to Chicago shooting with Herb. So those are like, it's like 2 days of me sort of being on set and shooting with an artist and making sure, he's hitting his talking points and all that kind of stuff. So that's a typical sort of day/week for me. It's just a lot of talking. It's a lot of emailing. It's a lot of talking to people. It's a lot of sort of adhering to deadlines, things like that.
I'm curious about how things have changed in the media because you mentioned this before, the pre-social media, and now, at one point I think there was an idea that artists are not going to need publicists anymore because they can speak directly to their community. What does that look like now for media relations person? Like you mentioned, you're still kind of engaged with them and ensuring that they're coming across right.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So I will say an artist can for sure speak directly with the media community, especially now with like the breaking of the barriers and people reaching out to artists directly on social media and things like that. What I would say is that the biggest thing that a publicist, and I use the word publicist very very in this way, in a traditional sense of like, we're storytellers. So a lot of the times you need a third party to tell your story, because you need somebody with an unbiased opinion and unbiased view, somebody who hasn't grown up in your shoes doing what you're doing, telling your story. Because I have a very on, like, for example, G Herbo. I didn't Chicago. I grew up in a very small town, so I have a very different perspective on G Herbo's story than he does. He, you know, for him, a lot of the way that he grew up is normalized. For me, it's not. So I can articulate the plight and the things of his story in a different way. So having somebody articulate who you are as an artist and the story that you're trying to tell, and also the story that you're trying to tell with your projects, even just like, let's step away from the broader sense of you being an artist. That's the importance of a publicist. So yeah, you can reach out to, you know, XXL can hit you every day and try to, and, you know, get an interview with you, but it's you then coordinating with me to figure out, okay, what are the talking points that we're trying to hit in this interview? What are the goals here? What are we trying to achieve with this? You know what I mean? And what's the story?
Yeah, I think it's even more urgent for having a publicist these days, because they have so much opportunity to say what they want to say. I would imagine that you guys are always kind of having to watch their back and fix up things that they may have said that didn't, you know, work as well. So that's always that factor too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is the sort of it, like the crux or the plight of the digital age of being a publicist is the idea that, like, you know, if a story gets picked up by a small outlet, like if this would have happened 15 years ago and some small little blog picked something up that was maybe a negative story, you know, the chances of it going super viral too quickly is like, okay, we could probably we have a little bit more time to do damage control against this, right? Whereas in today's world with social media, with how quickly people like can connect to news and can connect to information about people that they want to know information about, things can go viral so quickly that it gives us as publicists less time to do damage control and step in, you know, to
snatch that phone.
Exactly, to defend those situations.
Stop talking. All right. So I want to talk about what you got coming up, because, you know, I want to make sure we are all prepared and lined up to get popping with your stuff this year. What do we got coming up? What is it? March now. Black History Month just ended. So what's happening now for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so a big thing that I'm, you know, focused on right now is, so I run G Herbo's nonprofit along with doing the media relations for it. So it's called Swerving Through Stress. So we're gearing up for a lot of big activations in May for Mental Health Awareness Month. So that's super exciting. He'll be around doing a lot of talks, doing a lot of stuff in Chicago that month. So be on the lookout for that. From there, also kind of like still focusing on music, working a lot of independent artists, working a lot of major artists this year, but also moving into the consumer brand space. So I work a Vietnamese coffee shop here in Chicago called Viet 5. I also work a beauty brand called Glam Room, and I'm working sort of an immersive experience in the Water Tower that's going to be opening in a few weeks. So I'm really excited about sort of like, listen, music is my first love, but with my master's in media management and sort of just continuing to always push my own skills and boundaries, I'm excited about moving into some of these non-music consumer spaces this year.
That I got a little background. Hold on.
Gotta love the city, right?
Yeah, exactly. You were out there. You didn't grow up in Chicago, you said, either. You kind of, were you a New Yorker? Were you in the New York area?
Yeah, so I was born in Germany, grew up in upstate New York, in a really town. It's about an hour north of Syracuse, and then I moved to New York City for college. So I call myself a New Yorker because I spent 11 years in New York, in Brooklyn specifically.
You were a New Yorker. You were in New York State. That's different, you know.
Exactly.
But okay. So exciting things happening. I have one question. I want to get that in. If you could put that question back up. with the beauty room, the glam room you've got G Herbo's mental health awareness. We definitely want to be on top of that, because that is definitely a big topic in the hip hop space, and the media artists are really suffering right now. And I think that it's underreported about what's happening with them with mental health awareness.
And not only artists, like, I mean, coming out of the pandemic, like, we're all, you know,
yes,
we all need to take a break and focus on our mental health for a second. So yeah.
Absolutely. Any big events, festivals, concerts you got coming up that you might want to give us a drop on?
Man, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head at the moment. But just Mental Health Awareness Month is going to be a big month for us.
And that's, what is that, June or May?
May.
May. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right, we're going to stick there, and I'm going to take a couple of questions. Eddie M says, do upcoming artists need to pay outlets to get that publicity? Is that what the major guys are doing? And is it all about money equals access and exposure?
No. I would say it's smarter to pay a publicist to get you on those outlets, because 9 times out of 10, those outlets that are charging you to, you know, get an interview or get a look or whatever, they're talking to me for free. So you should just pay me, and then I'll talk to them.
Okay, got it. So that's not the secret, because people are trying to figure out, well, what are these major artists doing? How are they getting access? You know, I've heard about this pay to play. Is that really happening? And you know, what's the best route for folks?
I mean, it is happening. It's happening for independent artists. You know what I mean? That is how some of these media partners are, because the thing is, blogs and a lot of media partners are not, you guys aside, because you guys do a great job, but a lot of them are not championing up and coming artists anymore, you know. And because they need to drive clicks, and they need to drive advertising and awareness on their own, for their own, you know, to keep their own lights on. So at the end of the day, a lot of the times they're looking to do those pay to play opportunities with the smaller artists that they know that they wouldn't just cover anyway, so that they can make their bottom line. But the major artists, like, they're getting that coverage because they have 2 and 3 publicists sometimes, especially an artist that's signed to a major label. They have a, you know, Sony or Republic or Epic Records or whatever has their in-house publicist, and then that artist will also have their own publicist, you know, that in the tuck, similar to Herb. Like, granted, I definitely lean more on the nonprofit side of his media relations, but a lot of artists will have, you know, their own publicists on the team, or their own person that can do that, as well as the label publicist, and those people will work together in tandem to get the biggest sort of media exposure for the artist, or the single, or the album, or whatever it may be.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. We don't want to hold everybody up, but we're excited about Mental Health Awareness Month. If folks are in Chicago, we definitely want you guys on the ground. So we're gonna look out for all those Chicago folks to go and support and cover these exciting events. And I know you got a lot coming on. We'll be making sure we're posting all the opportunities from Ashford Media coming up. Thank you so much, Teresa, for dropping those jewels on these folks out here. The road to success, the road to your own brand can be windy. You start off thinking it's one thing, as Teresa said, and wound up in a whole nother place and a new understanding. But is it worth it overall, having your own
brand? It is so worth it. I wouldn't change this for the world. Like, I'm stressed, and I talk about my anxiety and things like that. I'm so blessed today to do exactly what I want to do for myself. I'm my own boss. Like, I would not change any of this for the world. So I'm super blessed.
Well, we are blessed to have you, and we thank you for those jewels. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Everybody continue to follow for more from our speaker series. Thank you so much, Teresa. Have a great one.
Thank you, Felicia.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.